All right, well, welcome everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good noon. It's 12 p.m. noon on the dot Eastern time. Welcome wherever you are joining us from today to July's PI Midlantic Predictive Index Monthly Webinar Refresher. Really looking forward to today's session. I'm just going to go ahead and mute everybody here. Christine, you are muted as well, but as we get through today's session, if we have any questions, folks can certainly unmute themselves. But before we get into the session, first want to welcome you all back. Many of you have joined us plenty of times on our monthly PI webinar refreshers. We do these sessions on a regular basis to help you sharpen the saw and keep active with using the Predictive Index program and platform and some of the insights that are given to you by the data. If this is your first time, however, welcome to the fold. Like I mentioned, we host these, generally speaking, about 11 times a year, 12 times a year on various subjects: sales, communication, regular PI refreshers, you name it. And during these sessions, we like to keep them as interactive as possible. So everybody's muted on today's call when you enter in, but as Christine and Fran are presenters for today's session, as they're going through the content, if any questions come into your mind, please feel free to go ahead and type them into the chat. Hopefully everybody's well versed with Zoom at this point. The chat bubble is down there on the little nav bar in your browser or in the application. I'll be monitoring the chat in case there's any questions that are pertinent to where we are in today's presentation. And we'll also leave a few minutes at the end there for any questions that didn't get answered. So please feel free to chat them in. This time is for you, and you get out of these sessions what you put in. I'm a firm believer in that. And without further ado, Christine, Fran, I am going to turn it on over to you.
Well, thank you so much, Clayton. We're really excited to be here with everyone today. I'm super excited that Fran agreed to join me. So Fran is someone I've known for a couple of years. We ran into each other in our work together, actually with PI, and found some great synergies in teaming up. So I will let Fran go ahead and kick it off.
I'm on the spot now. All right. Thanks everybody for joining. Appreciate the time that you're putting into this, and appreciate the opportunity to come down here. And I'm actually co-located with Christine today. So it worked out very well because I happen to be coming down to this area today and stopped into the office and got to see everybody. But we're talking about connection, and we're talking about the connection between effective leader and leadership and communication. And that really, when we think about what leadership is, it is communication. Because what we want to do is elicit a response from somebody. And I want to get into how do we define leadership, right? So let's kick it off. Leadership is very simply, I believe, summed up by this phrase right here. Leadership is a word used by many, but truly understood by few. I truly believe that. And I think that a lot of people, the more organizations that you work in, the more people that you work around, the more environments that you're exposed to, you'll always get different definitions of leadership from people at all different levels of organization. And so I throw that out here at the very beginning because I think as we sit in leadership positions, it's an important question to ask. Not only ourselves, but also those who work for, around, and with us, and those we work for. How do they define leadership? Dr. Jack Stark, who said this quote, he's the man in the picture right here, surrounded by a number of trophies, 22-time national champion, primarily at Nebraska. He was the performance development coach for Nebraska football, and then went on to win 8 NASCAR championships with Hendrick Motorsports. But this is what his belief is, and I agree. I'll throw some definitions out there because we're going to tie this back, and you're going to see this theme of communication, right? The art of motivating a group of people. There's a common goal, mapping out where you need to go. How are you going to win? but we also need to be dynamic, exciting, inspiring, right? Nobody wants a leader who comes in and is flat. It doesn't mean we have to be animated and get excited and bounce up and down on the table, because we're all going to be, we have to be authentic. And we have to think about, how do we present ourselves and how are we viewed? But it's about influence, the influence between leaders and followers. But what are we trying to do? Are we intending change? What are the mutual benefits? And then it's about developing. We often forget about that when we talk about leadership, that one of our primary jobs in leadership is to develop others below us. And then there's this process of social influence. We need to maximize the resources that we have, the tools at hand towards that goal, towards that vision. So I encourage everyone to think about leadership in a couple of these terms. There's no one answer. There's no silver bullet on this. There's nothing that's going to say this is the pure definition of leadership. It has to be tailored to our authentic selves as individuals, our teams, and the construct that our teams operate under, and then our organization. And we have to figure out what works and then define it. This is us.
Yes, this is me.
They know you.
I'm Christine Ippolito. I'm the founding principal of Compass Workforce Solutions. Compass is an award-winning human resource firm. We are also a certified WBE by several organizations. I am a very proud member of the PI Atlantic team since 2018, and there's a picture of the team down there at the bottom. As you can see, you definitely have your own army of support behind you, all of you that are using PI. And I'm a certified PI practitioner. Fran's going to show you some really awesome photos about him and his military service. So I thought the only thing that maybe could touch on that was a really good picture of my rescue dog, Little P. My PI profile is I'm a strategist. So strategists are results-oriented, innovative, analytical, and they're drivers of change. And that's exactly what we do here at Compass, is we help our clients drive forward to achieve the business goals that provide success and opportunities for themselves and their employees. So go ahead, Fran.
All right, this is me. So as Christine said, I met Christine a couple of years ago, and I have become a huge fan of Predictive Index in the work that I do in leadership development and in the companies that I run. So I'm the founder and CEO of a company called FRsix. We're a service-disabled, veteran-owned small business here in New York, primarily deal in both leadership development and organizational change management, and then also security, because that's a byproduct. Can't run away from it, because I did happen to spend 13 years in the Army Special Forces as a Green Beret. I'm also the creator and host of the Jedburgh podcast, and that I speak to transformational leaders, visionaries, drivers of change, those dedicated to winning no matter the challenge in any industry. And the reason why that is important when we talk about leadership is because character at the end of the day matters. How we assess, number one, the talent that we bring into our organizations, and then how we, number two, develop them is critical to the success as individuals, as teams, and as organizations. And so I try to bring that into every organization that I'm a part of and that I work with, whether that be on leadership development, executive coaching, or in the security or transformational and organizational change management. And that comes from having a strong foundation and having a strong process. And that's why I think Predictive Index has been awesome for me and my organization and the companies I've worked for, because it's informative and it's helping us to shape and map how we assess and then develop our leaders. And I'm a captain because I don't know, I guess I like to be in charge. All right. One of the things that I want to talk about up front, we define leadership. Now, once we define leadership, we have to now put in our mind that leaders are built from the start. Every organization that demonstrates success over the long term, when we talk about dynasties, right? Think about this, if you're into athletics, or you think about those teams that have dominated over the long term. I'm from Boston, so I'll throw out the Patriots, right? Don't hate me for it, even though I'm in New York right now. Okay, but think about those teams, right? That are the ones who are consistently dominant in areas. Think about companies. Think about a company like GE, who has dominated over decades, centuries, and has diversified into so many different branches. From GE Capital, which I think went away, to building aircraft engines, to building refrigerators and washer and dryers. The reason is because They build leaders from the start. Think about the last commercial you saw for the Army, or the last commercial you saw or poster that you saw for the US Marine Corps. It always talks about leadership. It never says, come join our organization, we're going to teach you how to be a follower. They teach you how to be a leader from day one, because when we develop leaders from day one at every level, we're building resilient organizations where people think proactively about the situations that they're in, and they jump in to solve problems, solve challenges, and become active participants in the success and the growth of the organization. Why is that important? Well, we're not going to have everybody who comes into an organization, even the most junior person on day one. Yes, we want to define and talk to them as leaders because they are, but we're not necessarily going to put them in charge, right? They might be in charge of themselves. They might be in charge of a few people. It might take them years to get there, or we might hire them as the CEO or the chairman or some executive level position. So we, as hiring managers, as organizational leaders, have to think about, what are the roles on my team? And if I have all these people and all these leaders that I'm developing, what do I actually want them to do? Where do I want them to fit in? We care about their role, right? What's their role? Their role is the thing we ask them to do every day. There's a specific set of skills. That's okay. That's why we brought them in. That's really important. But they're also going to have a role across one of these 4 areas: thinker, promoter, coordinator, and action-oriented staff. And we're going to break them down here in a second. We want to think about our team in this manner. We want to think about our company in this manner. Who fills these roles? Because they're critical. First, talk about the thinker. I put a picture of Steve Jobs up here. He's holding the iPhone. Nobody thought prior to the iPhone that we would ever have this device that has now become so commonplace that I can't rip it out of my kids' hands without them screaming and yelling at me. But this changed the world on a simple idea. I have a Walkman and I have this flip phone that I have to dial numbers into. Well, what if I could listen to my Walkman and my CD player that I carried around on my phone and did the same thing? And that idea changed the world. It now has more technology than the space shuttle had when we sent people to the moon. The thinker is the idea and the knowledge person whose wisdom guides the organization. It's important because they're the ones who's visualizing success. They understand the operating environment. They're crafting a strategy and success. They're removing barriers. We talk about them being a member of the team because they're not necessarily going to sit on their perch and look down on everybody and say, this is what I want you to do. Listen to me. They've got to get in the weeds. They have to understand it, but their focus is on the big picture. Where are we going? How are we going to get there? What's that next idea, that next thing that's going to transform my organization? It can be as tangible as the iPhone, or it can be as a strategy if we're talking about a service-related business. That thinker is critically important because that comes back to our mission, that comes back to our vision, and that's going to define the end state that we want to be in, the success and the definition of success later on down the road. So we want to think about, who is that person? Is it the CEO? Is it the chairman? Maybe. Could be. Let's think. The next is the promoter. Well, someone's going to get out there and advocate for the organization. Okay, this is the person who represents the organization through their marketing, their communication, their leadership. They're the face. They're standing up. It may or may not be that thinker, but it's got to be the person who's standing up there and pounding the pavement every day saying, this is what's going to align us. This is our vision. We're going to take possibly this complex problem set that we have, complex set of services, complex product that we have, and we're going to break it down into simplistic terms to generate sales, to generate support, to get people to buy in, both internally in the company and externally. And we're going to build barriers amongst people. We're going to build cohesion. We're going to gain support up, down, and across our organizations. And they're also a member of the team. So as we look at our organization and we have our thinker and they're driving us towards that goal, they've identified it. Now who's the person who's rallying everybody? Who's driving support? That's the promoter. Critical to the second role here within our teams. And the next one is the coordinator. Why is the coordinator important? Because somebody's got to look down and in. If we have the thinker and they're setting the vision, and we have the promoter who's up and out across outside of the organization, rallying that support, bringing people together, someone has to be what I call down and in, looking very tactically into the organization. Who's actually going to make all these things work? One person's out there advocating, one person's throwing out ideas, but who's got to make it work? That coordinator has to make it work. They've got to take internally, understand who's in the organization, what are the skill sets that are required to accomplish the mission. They have to take those goals and provide clear direction and expectations. They're the ones who are responsible for action and results. And they have to transcend those organizational barriers within. If we have our thinker and our promoter who are transcending those barriers that are external to the organization, our coordinator, oftentimes we could think about our CEO, our VP of operations, our organizational division leaders and department heads, who are the ones who have to drive that vision down and in their organization. They're going to be the coordinators, and they have to be agreeable. That's why I have this quote from Patrick Murphy, who is the former undersecretary of the Army and also congressman from Philadelphia, because he talks about when we build organizations, we're going to disagree, but we can't be disagreeable. We have to come together. This coordinator is going to be the one who's going to bridge that executive vision with everybody who has to get that work done on a daily basis in a unified manner. And finally, we have the action-oriented staff. This is the process. That's why I put Josh Bridges up here, because we have to love the process. The action-oriented staff have to love the process. They're going to carry out those daily functions. They're going to ensure the ongoing success of the organization. They're going to drive the tangible results that are mission-focused, goal-oriented. Back to the thinker. The thinker put out that strategy. They put out that end state, that vision, that clear guidance that they want to go to. This action-oriented staff is going to achieve that. That's often the majority of the team. And so we have to bring them and empower them and tie that back to, why do we build leaders from the beginning? Because we want an action. And why do we say action-oriented staff? Because an empowered organization of leaders will become action-oriented. They will seek solutions proactively. They will come to work every day with that drive and that excitement to go to the next stage, go to the next level, find the new solution, the curiosity that we so look for in building our teams. If we don't develop leaders from the start, and we don't assess people on their leadership capability and what they bring to the table for our team, and we have a bunch of quote unquote followers, we lose that bias to action. We lose that action orientation. And then it becomes harder on our coordinator, on our promoter, on our thinker to drive our teams in the direction that we want them to be, because we're micromanaging. We're forcing people to do things that they might not otherwise do. When we want them to do those things because we've empowered them, because they're excited about it, because we've gone back to our definition of leadership in our organization that clearly defines how are we empowering and creating an environment by which my action-oriented staff comes to work every day and gets the job done to a high level consistently. That's because we built leaders from the start. But how do we do it? Because we can't just sit there at any level and start yelling at people and screaming at people. People tell me all the time, right? Well, you were in the military. Didn't you just sit around and wait to be told what to do? Absolutely not. Absolutely not, because we develop leaders from the beginning, and the majority of your team, especially in special forces, I was often, as a commander of a special forces team, the least informed and the least knowledgeable about what we were doing. Because my job was to bring the resources to the team, because I had 11 other people who were experts in their domain, who brought the ideas, brought the clarity, and told me what they needed to be successful in their job. And my job was to understand the big picture, the direction we were going, the vision, the resources that were on hand and available, and then bring that to support. But it all comes down to communication. I think it's important to define communication, because I think we often forget about that. What are we trying to do in communication? If we think about that definition of leadership and some of those that we threw out there, we could tie every one of those definitions of leadership back to an ability to communicate through whatever means that might be: speech, signals, writing, behavior. I'll take a tangent for a second and and say that we are forgetting, in my mind at least, so much about the importance of interaction on a personal level, on a one-to-one level, personal interaction. We resort so many times to our cell phones, our text messages, our emails. And what happens now? Think about the last time somebody called your phone. I bet a lot of people here would be like, why is this person calling me? And they look at their phone like it's a bother. But that used to be the primary means of communication, because a 30-second phone call is clear, it can be direct, and it can solve hours of back and forth on email or text that we misunderstood. I'll go in the order of at least what I think is the most effective communication, and first being verbal, right? Because we can express our opinions. Second, we have email. Often we write emails, but we do reread them, at least we should. And we think about, at least to some extent, what's in that email before we send it. Text, I think, is the worst, because we so often resort to text as our primary means of communication, but it's the one that we do the fastest with the least critical thought into what we're saying. And yet we expect a result that's at the highest level. And then we don't get it. And then that leads to further disruption in our ability to communicate. So we really got to think about how are we communicating with people in terms of the mechanism that we use. But why do we want to communicate with people? We got to create a connection. We got to know our people. We have to confirm alignment. We have to convey our direction and intent. And that's what's going to drive our action and growth. We can't expect people to come to work every day and just to do what we think they should do. We have to be clear, and we have to be consistent in how we message them. There are 3 components to every communication. And I want everyone to just take a second and think in your mind about, of these 3, sender, message, receiver, which one do you think the most important one is? All right, I'm going to ask Christine because she's sitting next to me. So, and she knows the answer, but you can give it to her. Which one of these 3 is the most important?
The receiver.
It's the receiver. Okay. Why is the receiver the most important thing? Simple. Throw these up here. When we deliver a communication, we too often assume that what we think we're saying is being interpreted the way we believe we're saying it. When in actuality, the whole reason we're communicating with somebody is to tie this back to our definitions of leadership at the start, because we want them to do something that achieves a result, that achieves a goal that we set forth, possibly something that they otherwise may not do on their own. Yet when we create a communication, whether it be verbal, whether it be email, text, whatever mechanism we're using, we often put ourselves first. How am I going to feel when I deliver this message to Christine? When I call United Airlines because my flight is canceled, and I yell and scream at the person on the other side of the phone who's simply managing a phone. They didn't have anything to do with my delayed and canceled flight, but they're the only person who can help me. And what have I done through that communication? Now I've upset them. I made them less inclined to help me. When in actuality, I have to think about how are they receiving my message? Because probably also in my frantic, irate tirade, I've also not been clear in my message. What's my actual problem? Where am I? What's the timeline that I'm on? Where am I supposed to be? How can we resolve it? And now that person can't take action. And we've destroyed our relationship. We've destroyed our connection, as brief as it might be. Take that into the workplace. How often do we bring people into the workplace and we think about ourselves and how we're going to feel? And we're talking, most often we're speaking in negative context when we talk about communication, unfortunately. But when I sit someone across from me and I have to tell them that they're not doing a good job, but it's going to make me feel good to tell them directly they're not doing a good job. Maybe they have to, but maybe that's what I have to do. But we have to think about, how is that person going to receive that message? How are they going to interpret it? What do I want them to do when we leave this room? And am I now going to package my communication in a way in which they're going to understand it and be able to clearly take action? And can I swallow my pride? Can I be humble? Can I show humility in that it doesn't matter how I feel? as the leader, because the end result is that this person is going to leave this conversation, this communication, and do the thing that I need them to achieve in their role because they want to. That's what we have to do as leaders. That's how we have to think about the communication and our style and how we approach every interaction. Dr. Alan Echtenkamp, who's an organizational psychologist, he says part of the emotion you're trying to evoke from people depends on the behavior you need from them. And that's a summary of what we're talking about here. What do we need people to do? What emotion as leaders are we trying to get them to exhibit through our communication to get them to achieve what we've set out? We have to be transparent. We have to display our intent. We have to share the right information at the right time with the right people. Who are we talking to? Why are we talking to them? And we have to think about their response. Will they get up from this chair and do the thing that I need them to do? All right. And the way to sum this up when we think about our communication is, what are we sharing? How are we sharing it? And if we keep that in our mind and we take that quick pause before every communication that we have and every interaction that we have, as difficult as they may often be and as busy as we may often be, I tell people all the time, when you're coming into a meeting, our schedules are often so packed. We do a lot on Zoom now. One ends, we click the red button, and then we go to the calendar, we click the next green button, and the next screen comes up, and there's a whole different set of people, and it might be a whole different topic. And for the first 5 or 10 minutes, we're still thinking about the previous meeting that we had. Can we take 10 seconds, 5 seconds before we come into that room, when we stand at the door, to just stop and think, what am I going into? What's the result I'm trying to achieve? What message am I sharing? And what action do I want? And that might only be 5 or 10 seconds, but that can be the difference between being in the moment and capitalizing on our next discussion, or coming in being distracted and running the risk of providing the wrong direction, lack of clarity, lack of transparency. All things to think about when we think about leadership in terms of communication and trying to elicit a behavior and an emotion from those around us. All right, so why does it matter? Okay, why does it matter? Why does leadership and communication matter in our daily lives? I joke all the time that it's super easy to run a business. Super easy to build a business. It really is. Do anything in life. As long as we're making a ton of money, the clients are lined up outside the door, we have all the best people who work for us, our recruiting pipeline is strong, and the market is great. Anyone can run a business all day long and be successful. But that's not the world we live in. We live in what I call VUCA. Volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. We live in a world of constant, unpredictable change at both the macro, socioeconomic, political realm, and in our daily lives. When we wake up and we hit the pothole, and we get a flat tire. I almost thought it happened to me today. That's going to insert change rapidly, violently, unpredictably into our day. How do we respond? Our ability to create teams that effectively lead and respond to constant unpredictable change is what our goal is as leaders. Our world is absence of structure. We don't most often have all the information. No successful business owner is going to come in and tell you, I have all the people in the world that I need. I have all the money in the world that I need, and I don't need more. Everybody wants more people, more money to be more effective. We often have limited direction except for a clear goal because of this world that we live in, and this world as leaders that we have to think about: volatility, uncertainty, complexity, ambiguity. I throw up some examples. No one thought in 2022, 2023, that we would have a land war over ground in Europe that would have effects on the global scale. commodity prices that affect nearly all businesses, supply chain disruption due to that. But it does, and we have to respond. COVID, everybody knows. Okay, COVID affect how quickly everybody was affected by COVID, and those companies and those organizations that quickly modified the way they do things to get back and find success and figure it out, and those that just hoped to go away. We all sat there for 2 weeks and hoped. And then some people pivoted and iterated, and others continued to hope. Talk about extreme weather conditions that can happen all over the world. I put up Uber and Airbnb, and I would ask the question, why is that important? And think for a second about, especially if you're from New York and you know New York taxis. Well, 10, 15 years ago, before Uber came, that medallion that authorized you to have a taxi cost $1 million. And that was the only way to run a taxi in New York City. People made a lot of money on the legit and the black market on those medallions, and never, ever considered that one day they'd be completely obsolete. That disrupted an entire industry. Airbnb, Hilton, Sheraton, major players in hospitality had cornered small markets all over the world because you couldn't stay anywhere. Well, what happens when you can just go on an app and stay at somebody's house for a fraction of the price? That monopoly they had on pricing rapidly changed. Their inventory went up. They had to adjust. Now we talk about, are we in a recession? I don't know. I used to be a financial advisor. I'm not anymore, so I can't give any financial advice. I don't know. There's a lot of thoughts on that. But we need to be thinking about that. Because tomorrow, or even today, by market close, can introduce that volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity, and all those resources we thought we had, and all those clients, and all that money we thought we had because we were so successful, can be gone. So when we empower leaders, when we bring people into our organization who demonstrate the character and the behavior that is going to stand up and be action-oriented in times of volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity, we are building an organization that is resilient over time and prepared for success. And that is why I use predictive index. Because that's what it's going to show you.
So for those of you that have your placards or your self graph, now would be a great time. I'll just give you a second to pull that out. And then I'm going to take everything that Fran shared with us. I'm going to tie it back so that you can use his leadership skills and abilities, tie it back into PI, into your self chart, and really understand how do we drill down and have maybe a smidge more certainty, right? Because PI gives us more certainty about what drives people, what their needs are, and what their behaviors are, and then also what's going to be motivational to them. Okay. So predictive index measures 4 different behaviors. And so the first one is dominance. And oftentimes, you see the A stands for dominance, the drive to exert influence on people or events. B is extroversion, the drive for social interaction with other people, and if interaction is energizing. So if I have a tendency to need to connect with others, want to connect with others, or am I more introverted and analytical, and interacting with others could be energy depleting for me. Patience. So my need for stability or my drive for change. And then formality. So the drive to conform to rules and structures. One thing that's really important is, I think that one of the biggest benefits that organizations and individuals and leaders get from predictive index is this enhanced sense of self-awareness. Not only do you become more aware of who you are, and then you can also use the behavioral patterns and the profiles to understand your team better. But one of the things that we need to understand about being a leader is we are always impacting the people around us. Our intensity level, our energy level, and the vibes that we give off set the tone for our connections and constantly have an impact on those around us. So one of the things that's really important is, I think as young people, maybe we were all taught the golden rule by our parents or those around us that loved us. That the golden rule said, treat others how you would want to be treated. But predictive index shows us that that is not the case. That is not the reality of human interaction. And we get insights into how others want to be treated by understanding their profile. So keep it in the back of your mind as you're thinking about communication and leadership. The golden rule really should be, treat others how they want to be treated. Treat others in a way that's motivating for them and meets their needs, and put our needs a little bit to the back seat, and that's going to propel you forward. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to dive into each behavior specifically. I'm going to tie it back to what team member role does that behavior have a tendency to play. I'm going to talk about the communication style, tone, and pace that behavior tends to demonstrate. And we're going to talk about both sides. So the PI assessment, again, huge insights into how we communicate, our management style, our ability to delegate, or our tendency to want to hold everything in, how we make decisions, and how we respond to change. These are all critical factors when we're framing and designing communications that are going to be effective, make cohesive teams, and propel our organizations forward. So if you have your graph, right, everyone should remember your full profile. We're going to be referring to the self, right? That is this top portion. If you have it handy or you have your placard, it's just going to be a great tool. You could jot some notes down. I know Clayton always records this and emails it to everybody. So you can always come back to this section in the presentation if that's going to be super helpful for you. I know the high Ds are scrambling at this moment so that they can take all this down. Okay, the A drive, right? So what we know about the A drive is high A's are independent. They like autonomy. We're competitive, challenge. We want to be involved in the big picture. We're very conceptual in how we think, and we want to be recognized for our individual contributions. And we like to create our own universe, right? That's the need for control, that high need for control over people around me and the events that are happening around me. Low A's definitely want to work together. They love being part of a team. They're extremely supportive. They don't like individual competition. They want to be successful with and through others, and they need a lot of support and encouragement. So if you're a high A, you're probably playing that action-oriented role on the team. If you're a low A, you're a fantastic coordinator. You're bringing everybody together. You're resolving conflict. You're connecting. You're pulling people together. Now think about the energy of a high A. I'm a very high A. So I have to be mindful that my energy and my intensity can very easily overwhelm a low A. So in my communication, if I'm too intense, if I'm too direct, that other person is going to shut down. I'm going to take away their creativity and their ability to solve problems. So high A's are very intense. Lower A's are more easygoing and laid back. We need to strike a balance in how we're connecting. High A communication style, direct, authoritative, telling. I'm not maybe so much inclusive. I'm challenging. I'm asking questions. I want to understand why. And I'm super assertive in presenting my own ideas. So, and I talk about I, me, my in my conversation and in my tone. Lower A's, inclusive, collaborative. They're going to ask opinions of others. They're going to get input from the team. They're going to be listening. They're going to be very focused on us. We are. How do we accomplish this together? Okay, so just to recap, high A's are generally action-oriented team members. Lower A's, they're going to be those coordinators on a team. So think about who's on your team, and does that resonate with you? Now we're going to move into B, right? Extroversion. So high Bs, a lot of social interaction, extremely verbal. They connect well with others. They love public recognition. Opportunities to sell, they're extremely persuasive, right? So that high B, a natural promoter, a natural connection between the outside of the organization and the inside of the organization, and sharing what's going on, what's happening, making things clear to the external world. What is that organization about? What is our mission? What is our vision? Where are we going? Lower Bs, very introverted, very analytical, more interested in being on their own, but they're thinkers. They're constantly processing, right? They're constantly putting things together, making connections, amazing problem-solving skills. If you can give a low B a problem and a little bit of time and a quiet space, that is how they are going to be most effective. Your high Bs are very positive. You can feel the positive energy, right? They're persuasive. Lower Bs, a little bit more subdued, a little bit quieter, right? So tone of voice, all these things are going to be different. High Bs, persuasive, open, communicative, verbal, very frequent communication with others, almost to the point that sometimes high Bs may be interruptive or disruptive in the workplace, because if they have a thought or idea, they're often running to share it and to talk it through. They have great social connections in the work environment, and they'll come up with ideas, but they'll start talking about things even before they're fully fleshed out. Your lower Bs, much more reserved, cautious, introspective. They're limited in their conversation, and the conversation is much more focused on technical details and task orientation. How are we going to get this done? What's happening at work today? Less social. Lower Bs may need to be invited into a conversation, need to be directly asked, what do you think? How do you want to weigh into this? And definitely lower Bs prefer written communication. You might get a memo from a low B, a PowerPoint, definitely email communication, scheduling time to talk versus just diving into conversations and impromptu meetings. So again, we're recapping. Your high Bs are your promoters. Your lower Bs are your thinkers. Patience. Right? So the need for stability or the need for change. High Cs, long-term affiliation, very loyal. They like predictability. They enjoy knowing what the day will bring. They like being around the same people. They like being able to anticipate, what is my day going to look like? Planning my day. They're methodical. They're process-driven. And they want to be recognized for their loyalty to the organization. So your high Cs are great coordinators. They're process driven. They're great at documenting things. They're great at looking at how are we doing things now, okay, and understanding the current state of the organization. Lower Cs, they like variety, they like change. They're constantly moving around, on the move. Repetition is not their friend. They like to do different things. They like to change priority, and they're moving at a much faster pace than others. Now, your low Cs are your action-oriented staff, a lot of thinking, a lot of new ideas, and constantly talking about the future, what's new, what's next, what's coming. Your lower Cs can also be thinkers, right? It's those new ideas, that constant flow of maybe we should try this, maybe we should try that, what if we did this? And they're not as concerned about change, maybe in some degrees too interested in diving forward and just seeing what's going to happen without balancing that out. So their energy, high Higher C, patient, laid back, methodical, calm, very predictable in how they're going to react and respond, which brings a sense of calmness and certainty to the work environment and in their leadership style. When you have to deliver bad news, most people are much more comfortable delivering bad news to a high C because you know exactly how that person is going to respond. The same way that they're probably going to respond to good news, right? Lower C's, much more on the move, in motion. You might have to chase a lower C down to share information. And they're going to just not want to have a conversation for too long of a time. So higher C's listen more than they talk. They're very steady and methodical in their pace of communication. They're going to talk about the current process, the current procedure, the current state. Your lower C's, much more speedy, likely to interrupt. They're going to complete sentences for you, focused on change and moving forward. So if you're going into a communication and you know that there's low C's in that communication, be prepared with your FAQ, because they're going to constantly interrupt and ask questions. They're going to want to know, how are we going to move forward? When is this starting? Lower C's also don't have a lot of patience, and they might get frustrated with questions. And the pace of the conversation from a lower C may be too much for higher C's to take in. So sometimes it's good to have a high C translator. So again, thinking about your low C's are thinkers. Your higher C's are your coordinators, and your action-oriented staff is on the lower C side, new ideas, new thoughts, new processes. Formality. Okay, so just, you guys can't see us. I'm a strategist. Fran is a captain. I have like 4 pages of notes in front of me. Fran has like a tiny piece of paper with 3 or 4 bullets. I am the high D. He is the low D. And it's great when we can tag team and work together. And you probably have people like this on your team where there's this great sense of balance and connectedness in how you can accomplish things together. Okay, so high D's, we love certainty. We want to know what's coming. We're planners, right? We're thinking about, what are we going to do next week, next month, next year? Let's set goals. Where am I going? What am I doing? What's coming next? We love to be specialists. We want to have great knowledge about what's going on and what's happening. The higher C's, right? Again, coordinators, great, fantastic coordinators, a high C and a high D together. Awesome. Process, procedure, documentation. They can create repeatable, deliverable processes. But your low Ds, again, action-oriented people moving forward, they much more comfortable in ambiguity. So we saw a lot of leaders at Compass, right? And a lot of leaders tend to be higher A's, right? Independent, challenging, assertive, self-confident. With that low D combination, operate great in ambiguity. They did much better in COVID, much more comfortable making things up as they went, much more comfortable with the rapid change and the daily updates, where in other organizations where you had leaders that had lower A's and higher D's, there can be a little analysis paralysis, a lot of uncertainty. What do I do? There's no guidebook. There's no rule book. I might upset someone by moving forward. So it's very interesting to see. And after this slide, I'll also get into, I think, what are the 2 most critical factor combinations. Your high D's are very detailed communicators, a lot of specificity, a lot of detail, may prefer written communication, definitely using notes, talking points, guidelines. If you see leaders coming into communication scenarios with notes or references, that's a big tip off. This is a high D leader. Very prepared for conversations. They know what they're going to say. They've thought it through. They've analyzed it. They've reflected on it. Much more likely to take into consideration, how is that going to resonate with the rest of the team?
Hold on. It's a webinar.
Oftentimes, also high Ds are going to repeat information. Your lower Ds, more freewheeling and off the cuff. So my lower D leaders have a tendency to want to wing it. Sometimes that can be a little bit dangerous. Like Fran just mentioned earlier, you hit a pothole with a car. If you hit a pothole in a critical communication or a massive speed bump because you didn't think through how something was going to resonate with the team, that's where sometimes lower Ds can have some risk in communication. So partnering with a high D person is a great opportunity for them to get that balance. And sometimes with low Ds, the communication can be so conceptual, maybe not actionable, right? Not enough information to actually take action and move forward. More information needs to be provided and fleshed out. So to recap, your high Ds, coordinators, low Ds, thinkers, and action-oriented staff. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to transition into what we call factor combinations with predictive index. Okay, there's two critical factor combinations that you should understand about everyone on your team because it's going to dramatically impact how your communication resonates with them. Also knowing this about yourself kind of indicates your willingness to delegate or your tendency to hold too many things on your plate, your problem-solving skills and decision-making, right? So when we talk about the A-B relationship, we're looking at which factor is higher on your profile. Okay, so A over B, if A is higher, then you're task-oriented. If B is higher, then you're people-oriented. And I'm going to give you a picture of this so that we can directly see it. So people-oriented leaders are much more social, much more connected, much more empathetic, much more trusting, much more likely to communicate, much more likely to share what's going on, and much more comfortable delegating. And in the front of their mind, that relationship with the team, the connectedness with the team, how the team is going to feel and respond, that's the priority. It's the natural priority whenever they're faced with a situation, a challenge, an obstacle. They're collaborative, right? They want to talk it through with others. They're going to talk it through. They're team-oriented and consensus-driven. If A is over B, right? These are people that are very direct, to the point, telling. A over B means I've thought it through, I've made a decision, and now I'm going to share it with you. So much less collaboration. A over B says I've made a decision, I'm moving forward. This is the direction that the organization is going. A over B is less trusting of other humans, just natural tendency, and very task focused. They're going to be focused on how do we get it done the best way, the fastest way, the more effective way, even if feelings might be a little bit hurt and feathers might be ruffled. So again, when you have critical communications, if you know you're A over B, get a trusted person on your team, another person at the same level who might be B over A, and collaborate. It's not going to be your natural tendency. You're going to think you're all right on your own, but in a critical communication, get some balance, get some feedback. How is this going to resonate? What do you think? The high Bs are going to share. And it's great to just have that thought process so that you can walk that through. Now we're going to get into the AD relationship. Am I comfortable with risk? Is risk something that's fun? Am I an adrenaline junkie? Am I a skydiver, right? Am I flying a plane? Do I like to drive my car fast? Because then I'm A over D, right? So very comfortable with risk. D over A, very cautious with risks. So when you start to hear people talk about their vacations, right? Who went parasailing? The high A. Who stayed on the beach? The high D. The beach is safety, it's security. And if you're in New York, Everybody knows we've had a few sharks in the water off of Jones Beach. So definitely the high Ds are staying on the beach and waiting for the lifeguards to make those calls. So, and again, there's a time and a place where both of these are critically important to the success of the organization. In this VUCA environment, right, that Fran talked about, VOCA, A over Ds are much more likely to move forward. D over A could get a little stuck, could need a nudge from that AD person. So again, think about on your team or in your peer circle, who balances you? When you've got to make a tough decision, a critical communication, who can you go to? All right, delegation. A lot of my high D leaders try to do too much, and then they get overwhelmed, and we get into kind of the challenge that perfection can be the enemy, when sometimes excellence and greatness is where we need to be. So just having that sense of self-awareness about yourself is super, super important, so that you can jumpstart yourself and get yourself unstuck. Okay. So again, if you have your graph in front of you, your self graph or your placard, A over D. Ooh, I'm down to like 4 minutes. We're almost wrapping up, Clayton, but thanks for the heads up. A over D, right? Risk is fun. Risk is fun. It's a new opportunity. I'm going to do it. I'm going to jump. I'm going to leap off that wall, and I'm going to build the parachute as I fall from the sky. A over D, I'm building the parachute before the emergency is even called. But the only problem is I don't know what kind of parachute I need, right? So think about this and how you delegate and what you're willing to do for risk. And if you're more comfortable specializing, right? High Ds are specialists, low Ds are generalists. Both are necessary and critical team players. So I'm going to give this back to Fran to tie this all together, wrap it up, put it in a fantastic bow for you.
All right. At the end of the day, we got to build teams. Okay. Teams aren't born, they're built, and they're built through proactive action. Everything we talked about here, operating in a VUCA environment of volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity, it all comes down to our mindset and how we've prepared ourselves, people around us, and how we've assessed them in our organization. Great quote here by Jason Khalipa, CrossFit champion, founder of NC Fit. He's the guy in the picture on the top. But winners stay calm and channel that stress into productive energy. Losers complain, fly off the handle, and lose their cool. In my experience, it comes down to a fault and focus. Absolutely true. What are we focused on when it matters most? And how do we assess our behavior of those we bring into our organization to actually do that when it matters? A couple of general thoughts. We build teams on trust. Trust comes down to how well we know each other. We forge our reputation every day through our hard work and our teamwork. We've got to remain calm. Regardless of the situation, we want to operate in a VUCA environment. We've got to remain calm. Otherwise, we'll make mistakes. Positive mental attitude. We got to be optimistic, okay? Not hopeful. All right, hope is not a course of action, but we got to be optimistic, and we got to find solutions that demonstrates curiosity that we need to drive forward and have that bias to action, and we got to have fun. All right, but too many times we wake up and we say, why am I doing this? This sucks. I don't want to be here. Go do something that you have fun with. Enjoy what you're doing, because at the end of the day, that's how we're the most successful. Right? So thanks everybody for joining us. I don't know if we have time for questions, but we can certainly try.
Do we have questions, Clayton?
Yeah, we do. First off, thank you so much. I mean, both of you really brought some great insights during today's session. We've got some comments here, and some of them are from, the earlier part, Fran. Would love to talk through some of those if you have a second. So the first question was really around, Fran, you brought up a point of the importance of avoiding micromanaging the action-oriented staff. And we just had a question if we could talk a little bit more about that. I'm sure a lot of folks on today's call, you've had situations where you've had a manager that was more of a micromanager and what that did to you. But I don't know, Fran, if you could unpack that a little bit in the short time we have. We've got about a minute left.
Yeah. So this is like a meaning of life question. There's no right answer. And so what I would think when we talk about micromanagement, we got to talk about the situation at hand. I was actually having this conversation with my wife last night about her job. Where do we need to be as leaders? Let's think about where we need to be as leaders. We need, in my opinion, we need to be at the point of action. When we move to the point of action where we're the most influential and the most impactful is where we have the most success. When we talk about micromanagement, we're most often talking about a leader being involved in an activity or a place in which their, whatever you want to call it, advice, input, oversight is not needed or warranted. Okay, meaning that the action-oriented staff has this locked up. They don't need the input from the leader. They don't need their eyes. They don't need the resources that they don't already have. That's the creating a micromanagement environment. So as leaders, when we're thinking about where do I need to be in any given subject, on any given day, in any given situation, where is the point at which I can make the most impact? Now, that's not a catch-all, right? Our opinion of where I can make the most impact and what my team thinks of where I can make the most impact may be two very different things. But that's where it comes down to communication, right? And we have to have humility and be humble enough to have that conversation with my team. What do you need from me? And sometimes if we've built a communication structure where feedback is warranted and welcome, then our team might be comfortable telling us, hey man, I don't need you. Go back to your office, get off the Zoom. We'll call you when we need you. And we got to build a culture like that. If we're top down and where we see micromanagement is where we have a more hierarchical structure of authoritarian, high A dominance organization, where that high A is not attuned to their dominance and they just want to take over the room in every conversation that they have, where sometimes as a leader, our best place might be to exhibit the low A and just shut your mouth and listen.
Self-awareness is key. Absolutely.
I mean, if I can add something to that, Clayton, what I see is if the leaders have communicated a clear vision and clear goals and objectives, they need to get out of the way of the how. The team has better ideas than you do, right? So now we know on our team, we've got a thinker, a promoter, a coordinator, and action-oriented staff. Get out of the how. Let them figure it out. They're better and smarter than you in a lot of different ways. I see way too many leaders get into the how and muck up the works.
Awesome. We did have another question here. I know we're out of time, so we will follow up with you after. Actually, I'll just address that here really quick. The question was about the AD relationship when they are both on the midpoint. Now, there is a certain relationship where the A drive and the D drive, when they're both high and when they're both equal, we call that AD conflict. The high A, think of that as the foot on the gas, the high D being the foot on the brake. What happens when you mash them both down? The wheels start to spin, right? When the A and D drives are both on the midpoint or they're both on the low side and equal, that much less comes into play, and we don't really consider that to be the AD conflict. When A and D are both on the midpoint, we're going to look to some of the other drives to give us some clues, some insights into how a person might approach that decision. Christine, I don't know if you want to tack anything on to that, but
that was excellent, Clayton. Thank you.
Well, thank you, everybody. Fran, Christine, thanks so much for joining us today for a great session. Hope everybody enjoyed. Apologize for going a few minutes over. If there are any questions that we were unable to get to today, reach out to us here at the home office at PI Midlantic. Reach out to your predictive index consultant. If you're not sure who that is, we'll point you in the right direction. And hope everybody has a great rest of your day. And we hope to see you on the next couple of sessions as we wrap up 2023. Take care, everybody.